They just double-crossed Maduro, and they just offered him in a platter. I think the one that loses more is Russia. Trump said, "Oh, we had a great conversation," and he's coming to the U.S. He's coming to the White House, and because that is his style. You put the gun on the table, and once you put the gun on the table, then you go and negotiate. You have Delcy Rodriguez kind of doing the dirty work, and because he'll be pushed to do it. I would love that Edmundo González Urrutia, who is the legitimate elected president of Venezuela, could take power now with Maria Corina on his side, because they were the leaders of the democratic movement that won the elections in 2024.
Welcome to FO Talks. With me is Leonardo Vivas. He's a professor at Lesley University and a walking encyclopedia on Venezuela. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Welcome, Leonardo. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Rohan. Very happy to be with you and to talk about this.
Right. Well, let's start with the basics. Can you just walk our audience through what happened in Venezuela? There was a U.S. military action and operation, and it ended with the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. What really went down?
Well, as you know, there was a huge fleet that the U.S. put in the Caribbean and build up of support to that in Puerto Rico, and so it was a huge mobilization. People, the estimate we're talking about, 8,000 military, including every sort of forces, and including Delta forces. Mm-hmm. So there had been prior to that some actions, and where they bombed a number of small vessels in the Caribbean, allegedly trafficking cocaine or other drugs, and after that, there was a location in the border with Colombia where cocaine was being processed and produced. That was bombed too, and the U.S. had been stopping ships, cargo ships that were tankers that were taking oil, allegedly, some of them, part of that, to Cuba, but the final destiny was either China or India. So that was a kind of the escalation, but at the end of the year, I was in a seminar discussing about this escalation, and there was a Venezuelan analyst. He used to be, he's called Andres Izarra, and he used to be communication minister for Chavez. So, but he's not, but he's against Maduro now because he and other people claim that Maduro just threw all the beliefs and all the philosophy of Chavez, overboard. And he said that that was not a chess game. That it was a poker game, mm-hmm. And then Trump was bluffing, and that Maduro was calling his bluff, and that is why he would be in the streets celebrating like in a party at the end of the year, and he was deadly wrong, because the U.S. had all these preparations had been made in order to do what they did. There was a conversation between Maduro and Trump in December too, and apparently very cordial, and both said very cordial, and Maduro of course offered a number of things, and apparently Trump said, Mr. Maduro, I think you should step down and go quietly and enjoy the rest of your life. And of course, Maduro refused, and that was December. So come the new year, and normally all these operations from the U.S. they take place in the weekends, because Trump is very careful to do things when the markets are not open, when when Wall Street is not running. So they did it Saturday in the wee hours, and what they did is that they sent 3 helicopters, just like when they captured uh, and killed Osama bin Laden. But in this case, they had all the information about the compound where Maduro lived, which is how to put it. It's like a small town, all enclosed with high security. I've been there for because one time my brother was very sick, and some family that were military said, "Okay, come in, and I'll send you some soldiers that can, donate blood." And so I did, and I thought, for me, Fortuna, which is called, I thought it was just one compound. No, it's like a small city, and and people live there. You have buildings and series of streets, and then you have the presidential compound, and it's highly security. And the people who defended Maduro were Cubans, not Venezuelans,
Right.
Cubans.
Right.
And that was an agreement that Chavez made with Fidel Castro early on, when he started his presidency. So and they had all the information. They made a buildup off the compound in somewhere. I would have thought in Puerto Rico or something like that.
I believe it
And
was
they
Fort Bragg. I think they made the mock-up in Fort Bragg.
mhm,
And it was the Delta Force who actually did everything, and they were the ones who
Delta Force.
went ahead with the final operation as well.
Yeah, and so they went in. The details of that is not. We'll know eventually. They come in, and just like happened with Bin Laden, in this case, they were not expecting that, and when they realized, they tried to go to a special uh, room, which is steel guarded, but they couldn't get in, and that's when they were captured and taken. In the process, 40 Cubans died, some from the military, lieutenant colonels, captains, sergeants, and others from the Ministry of the Interior of Cuba, because they were the special guard of Maduro.
Yeah, I think
And
it
well, they
wasn't
took
just
an
them. I think it
pardon.
wasn't just them who were taken off guard. I think everyone in the world, because when I was on social media and it was daytime in India, and I was seeing the videos, I thought this is AI. I thought this is some kind of an AI prank where they're showing these helicopters into Caracas, no opposition, nobody firing at them, and absolutely unguarded. And then you get the news that within 2 hours we got the news that Maduro has been captured, and it's not just him; it's his wife as well, and
His
they've been
wife as
taken
well.
to USS Iwo Jima, eventually taken to US mainland. Um, I think that was very impressive. Tactically, that's a major win for US forces. The
Oh
Delta
yes,
forces did a brilliant job. I mean, they took out all the Cubans and did not have a single casualty on their side.
yeah.
So that was really impressive. But I wanted to ask you, why did they take Maduro's wife?
Well, because she was part of the she was a very quiet person. He didn't do any, but she was very involved. At some point, she was president of the National Assembly, so and she was an important part of the party, of the Socialist Party in Venezuela, and but they acted always in tandem. They were kind of and she was very she is a very, I mean, she's a lawyer, and she's a talented lady. I would say, she has kind of a more solid background than Maduro himself, and I don't think he would he would move a finger without her support or advice. So, and also they were linked in the business as well. They were business partners, and what their relations with all this drug trafficking. She was part of that. Remember that two of her nephews were captured in Dominican Republic, and in a plane, I mean a Venezuelan plane from the oil company from PDVSA, and they were taken to New York, and New York they were prosecuted and condemned, and they were and they were, in jail, in prison after that, and it was the Biden administration who freed them for some agreement, political agreement, at what things that were happening at the time.
Right. Leonardo, you mentioned how Trump carried out this operation very strategically on a day which was Saturday because the markets were not open. But there was one more thing that coincided with that. The vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, was in Russia and not in Venezuela when this happened. And now she's the acting president, but Trump says the US is in control. So I want to
Well,
know.
I'm not sure that she was in Russia. That was a rumor. I don't think it was ever proven that she was in Russia.
Mhm.
Uh, I think many people said that because she only answered by telephone, and just, I think it was more security
Mhm.
procedures that were taking place. But in any case, I think her and her brother, who is the president of the National Assembly, Jorge Rodriguez, and he has been the mastermind of all the Maduro administration negotiations with the U.S., with the opposition, with in Doha, in Barbados, Dominican Republic, all the negotiations. He has been the head of and the mastermind of the government to negotiate, both with the U.S. and with the Venezuelan opposition at that time. Opposition.
Right. So
So
are they running the show now? Is Delcy and her brother running the show now in Caracas?
yes, they are. They are. Let's say, uh, but they are running the practicalities. But they are under huge pressure by the U.S. Like, I mean, all this operation to capture or not let shipments of oil to take place is on. They didn't stop that. So in a way, their management of oil has been controlled by the U.S. And there's different versions of what they want, of the U.S. wants to do. If they want to keep it in a special account, that was and other people said no, we're just going to use it here in the U.S. Uh,
Or sell it?
but they are running the specific things that are happening in Venezuela, and the first response from her was very, very critical, and saying, no, they kidnapped Maduro, he's our real president. But I think that was, they couldn't do anything different, because they couldn't show, because no, in my mind, I think they just double crossed Maduro, and they just offered him in a platter and say, here's Maduro. And this negotiation had been taking quite a long time, at
Mm.
least a year or more, and and they in the end, that is one reason why there was no response to this operation. Because, I mean, we don't know exactly who else, apart from the Rodriguez brothers, were in the move. They were, in the conspiracy.
Hmm.
But most probably there were some others. We don't know who. Now we know that Diosdado Cabello was not part of that, because you have internal mobilizations of what they call the colectivos, which are the kind of paramilitary groups that they move in, motorcycles, and there were a couple of days ago, or there were some shootings near the presidential palace in Caracas, and they were mobilized, and that was, I think, in response to what was happening, and still, so I yes, she is running, but it is difficult, because the people that were not in the conspiracy first, they should, that are part of the let's see, the elite, and who are taking decisions, they should say, wait, if they delivered Maduro, why not me?
Right.
I would, if I were Diosdado Cabello, that's what I would think.
Hmm.
And that's one thing. And the other is that they're under this pressure of the U.S. and the U.S. saying, well, Trump didn't say exactly that, but he said, almost said, I put her there. And so that is what is happening now. And there, of course, like always, there are some contradictions within the Trump administration about what to do. And Marco Rubio has said there are three phases. One phase is stabilization, to not allow things to run out of hand. Secondly, there would be taking care of the oil, making, bring back oil production and oil capacity. And then third, a transition, which is very vague. We don't know what they mean by that. But in the mind of Rubio, probably what he means is a transition to a different regime. We don't know exactly what that would be, but that's what I interpret from his words.
Yeah. Well, the last time I spoke to you, you detailed very brilliantly how the Trump administration was in two camps. There was the Rubio camp, and then there were the military generals. And the generals were not really in favor of putting boots on ground, but they've managed to pull off this brilliant operation, and they've delivered what Rubio wanted. So now the ball is in Rubio's court, and he has to take charge.
Well, we're not sure, because I think there's Miller as well, who's involved, and his optics are different, because Rubio wants to democratize Venezuela. Miller, he doesn't care about that. He wants he just wants to make the oil thing, but I don't think he knows much about Venezuela, and that is one of the things that that may be an impediment for this phase that has been mentioned by Rubio. And look, if you look at oil, which has been the thing that has been more mentioned, if you look at that, Venezuela's production is now close to 900,000 barrels a day. It used to be 3.3 at peak at some point. Even during Chavez, there was higher production than now, almost 3 times. But most of that is not gone, but it's in shambles. The refineries, which refine oil and produce gasoline, it used to have one of the largest refineries in the world, and Venezuela was an exporter of gasoline, and that collapsed. and they ended up importing oil, gasoline from Iran. And if you look, it's if you oil is there in Venezuela. They say, oh, the greatest reserves in the world. But then, in order you have to detect, and that is the only thing that is there. You know that you have huge reserves, but then you have to do the exploration and say exactly where they are, how deep, how much you have to drill, and then once you have all that data, uh, which is exploration, then you go to drill, and then you drill, and that is tricky because most of Venezuelan oil is very heavy, and it takes a process to convert that which is it's like in a way like butter. It's very thick, so it doesn't go easily through the pipeline. So you have to process that oil, and there are in Venezuela they during the democratic times in some very specialized research and development center, they developed a couple of technologies of how to deal with that and how to operate and make it function and go through the pipelines, and then to how to bring them uh, to the ships, the tankers and or the super tankers, and so that all that process
Hmm.
is in shambles, and
Right.
it'll take a long time to make that work again, and a lot of investment, and all the information that it's been going out there about the American oil industry. What it says is that most of the American oil industry is a bit skeptical about going there. The big companies, except for Chevron, because Chevron has
Yeah.
a license, and they are the main operators today, so they're confident that they can keep doing what they're doing. But I don't expect that there's going to be a huge mobilization of resources, people, money. And there's another thing, is that if you want that to be something permanent and not just a spike in oil production, you have to create the economic conditions in the country. And Venezuela ended to 2025 with close to 700% inflation rate. And
Mm.
we're talking that 2026 this year, it might be three digits. So if you don't bring that down, and you do all you have to do, and not talking about the debt, because PDVSA is broken. There is a huge debt of PDVSA. There is a huge debt of Venezuela Treasury, and if you don't do that, and if you don't have property rights accordingly, then how are you going to get the investment? Who's going to go? Who's going to dare go? To try that, and to put money in in a world market which has a lot of oil. Because
Mm.
if you look at oil prices, we're not talking about very high. They have been going down. The price of oil has been going down, and so what would be this appetite for oil product? Not really. So that phase of the Trump plan is not a given. It
Right.
is, you have some question marks. I'm not saying that it might not take place. The question is that it won't take place in the time frame that they might have in mind. It might
Mm.
take 2 or 3 years to do that. And if well, we're going to have the midterm elections here in the U.S. in November, and
Right. Well,
so
now that you've spoken so heavily on the oil, I want to get into the narrative that was created for this. When Trump came to the White House, he Well, he said that he didn't accept the election results in Venezuela and that Nicolas Maduro was not a legitimate president. That then turned into Venezuela is pushing in illegal migrants, criminals, gang members, and cartel members into the country. That was then evolved and changed into we are going to start striking boats linked to cartels, to then moving on to boarding Venezuelan oil tankers, and now eventually taking Maduro out of Caracas overall, and now only speaking of oil. And Trump has repeatedly said that we're going to take control of oil. So why has the narrative been so different? What are the audiences that Trump has been reaching out to with these?
Well, because the U.S. after the experiences in Iraq and in Afghanistan, uh, those they left the scars in the American imagination, just like the Vietnam War did in
Mm.
last century. After the Vietnam War, nobody wanted to know about anything about wars. Same here. And but in this case, it was not only the Democratic Party, say what typically the progressive parts of America. It was also the Republican Party and the Tea Party that uh, f- further right or in some cases ultra right movements within the Republican Party reject uh, participation in wars, and that is the reason why they don't like participation of the U.S. in regime change. So it's like a sin talk about regime change, and
Right.
uh, and that's why they had to adapt all this narrative about uh, which is they have a big kernel of truth. The question of the Venezuelan government being part of the handling of narcotics. Of course it is, and it's part of it's also part of the income of the Maduro regime gets, and the people running the government. So that's why they had to adapt their rhetoric to to these different phases. And now, of course, it was it was a success. Remember that we spoke last time? I said he needed a success,
Yes.
and the one that looked like the easiest one was gonna be Venezuela. But we in Venezuela we say that mango bajito. That means when the fruits are very near to you, you can get the fruits directly from the tree,
Yeah.
uh, which is mango. Mangoes in India. That's a place of mango, so you can get the mango directly from the tree.
Yeah.
I mean, as compared to the Ukraine peace discussions, which has taken more than a year, and they've been dragging and dragging and dragging, and we know there's some talk that there might be something coming, but there is always something coming regarding the Ukraine, and it never happens because the timing is maybe not right, or because maybe Putin is not interested in doing it, or maybe Ukraine is not going to be accepting all. So for whatever reason, and he needed a success, and he got it. It was flawless. It was really so well made, and now he can claim, which is the most incredible part. He can claim that he's running the country and that he's going
Hmm.
to get the oil, and that which we know the person. We know the way he never speaks with precision about things. He always talks in parables, or makes things very ambiguous. So you have to read between the lines.
Yeah. Well, he calls it weaving. He says that I like to do something called the weave, where he talks about multiple things and tries to stitch them together. But yes,
Yeah.
it was brilliantly done. It was brilliantly executed, and Trump has something to show to his audience. So I want to ask you about Russia and China. How are they going to be seeing this? Because for China, they've lost a critical and crucial oil source, and Russia has obviously lost an ally. But they would be taking some lessons out of this too. What do you think?
Well, I think the one that loses more is Russia, uh, because I mean Russia was a direct ally of Venezuela, and Russia was the main provider of armament. All the armament that has been bought in the last, I don't know, 15 years, 20 years has been Russian equipment. And and because some of that armament has been, bad maintenance and many. So there was an interest of continuing in that kind of business of the armament, but also from a geopolitical point of view, having this ally right there in the Caribbean, so near to Cuba and so near to the U.S. was a strong, like a stronghold, something you could use for whatever thing would happen in their interaction with the U.S. And they lost that,
Hmm.
or if they haven't lost it entirely, they're in the process of losing it entirely. China's different because China's interest is more in other realms of the economy, infrastructure, ports, uh, even also oil production, but their presence in the Venezuelan oil production is not that important. It's more important to the Russians, uh, because they used to have an important component of proportion of not China. China is more related to Guyana now. The country that has a border with Venezuela in the eastern part, which has a huge reserves of oil, and so those two countries now are practically, and especially while when times goes on, they're going to be more excluded. For look what happened in Panama. Panama managed two of the main ports. Uh, well, not China. Chinese companies manage two of the main ports
In the
the
canal. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and they just chained them. The
Hmm.
Panamanian government said, "Okay, sorry, you have to go," and they had to leave. And so what means it might be a partial retreat. Of course, it doesn't affect relations of China, especially with countries like Brazil,
Right.
or even countries like Argentina, which is, as you know, ran by Milei, who is a radical right leader, and uh, and they still do deals, and there will be more deals in the future uh, because they need it. So I don't think they will. There will be some retreat, major retreat, but and their influence will be direct influence in Venezuela will be probably close to zero in the
Yeah.
near future.
Okay, I want to talk about the region because it wasn't like it's just Maduro who crossed hairs with Donald Trump. And there are other countries like Colombia. Gustavo Petro also has been on the wrong side of Donald Trump. You've got Cuba. You've also got now Lula, who's become combative towards Trump. How are they going to be looking at what happened in Venezuela? Do you think they're going to be worried about an American action against them?
No, Maybe Petro was 3 days ago, but you know how Trump is. They already talked, and
Hmm.
Petro said, oh, we had a great conversation. And Trump said, oh, we had a great conversation. And he's coming to the U.S., he's coming to the White House. And because that is his style, you put the gun on the table, and once you put the gun on the table, then you go and negotiate. That is his. And uh, and we don't know exactly if and maybe that will favor Petro in the sense that he's not able to go to re-election, but the person of his movement probably will benefit from all this, crisscrossing with Trump. Uh, but the question is, the most important thing is that all these left-oriented countries, uh, Colombia, Brazil, Uruguay, Bolivia until recently,
Hmm.
but even countries like Spain or Mexico as
Hmm.
well, they could have done something when Maduro stole the election, and they did nothing. I mean, they just did some. Oh, we don't recognize. Show the ballot information. That's all they did. But did any of them, get together to ask for the OAS to convene the Organization of American States? No. Look, the last time the OAS did something in that respect, it was when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, and in Honduras there was a coup against Zelaya, and to they decided to stop it, and there was they called immediately all the organizations in the OAS, and they condemned what was happening, and and they took measures against that, and the government at the time, the ones of the coup, were totally isolated. That didn't happen in the case of Venezuela. So, to a certain extent, the
Hmm.
failure of these organizations, of these countries, to do something regarding the stealing of the nation by Maduro has, gave an argument for Trump to do what he did.
Right. You know, Leo, when I was watching the stills coming in and the videos coming in on social media, I kept thinking of what you told me the last time we spoke. You said removing Maduro would be the easiest thing to do. Everything else after that would be difficult. So I wanted to ask, and I wanted to end on this. What do you think is the future for Venezuela going forward for the 6 months, for the next 6 months, for a year? Do you think Delcy Rodriguez is going to continue? Are we going to see Maria Corina Machado coming back to the country? Or are we just staring at chaos?
Well, I put it this way: I would love that Edmundo González Urrutia, who is the legitimate elected president of Venezuela, could take power now with Maria Corina on his side, because they were the leaders of the democratic movement that won the elections in 2024 and 28th of July. But here's the thing: the Venezuela is still controlled in every single realm you can think of by the Chavista forces, the army, the judiciary, the prosecution system, governors, mayors, and the police security forces. And on top of that, you have a number of you know non-state actors like the Colombian ELN and the FARC, and the ones I mentioned just now, the colectivos that are bands of people with arms, with armament, and if you just imagine if for some reason there would be this change and this collapse in the government, and you would take uh, uh, Gonzalo Urrutia to Caracas and to take power, and he would sit in the presidential palace. Most probably, that would be very difficult to sustain. I mean, if you think pragmatically. So, to a certain extent, the fact that you have Delcy Rodriguez kind of doing the dirty work, and because he'll be pushed to do it. Look, we're talking now that Trump said, "Oh, they're going to close the major prison where they have torture in the center of Caracas. It's called the Helicoide, and now there's rumors that they're going to close the Helicoide, and where you have the largest part of political prisoners, and there is a lot of pressure to liberate the political prisoners, and they're talking about laws that are going to be introduced into the National Assembly for amnesty for all, and that was what Rubio said recently as well. Well, you should have amnesty not for the people from the government. You should have amnesty for the people from democratic organizations that have been made illegal and persecuted and taken to jail, and some of them killed. So, I mean, there is a lot of pressure, and probably we're going to be having a phase where in which many of these changes will be pushed. We don't know exactly to what extent Delcy and the new government will be able to deliver and to accept that that's going to be their role. Because I mean, maybe they've thought that maybe doing that is the best way to survive for the future. When everything is finished, this phase, and then we have a different type of regime, a democratic regime, they would still be able to participate and to go for election and eventually win an election. So maybe that's what they have in their mind. We don't know. Well, I don't know, and I'm not sure of what I'm saying, if that's true. But maybe that's what they have in mind. I know that some people in Chavismo have had this idea for many years, and that have been always sidestepped and pushed aside because they have been preaching openness for all in Venezuela. So we don't know. So it depends. The economy, how's it going to go? Oil, the pressure from the different armed groups. The pressure from dissent, internal dissent, Diosdado Cabello and others. What is the military going to do? Where are going to, the justices going to position themselves in this power struggle? We don't know. It's very tricky to follow up so many portions and segments of Venezuelan society and polity today.
Right. Well, on that note, Leonardo, thank you very much for speaking to Fair Observer and for sharing these wonderful insights.
Thank you so much, Rohan, and Happy New Year again for you and for all Fair Observer.
Happy New Year to you too.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.